Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Instant Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Elyse. And oh my gosh, I love this episode and this conversation that I have for you today. I'm just going to go ahead and dive into it because there is so much packed into this episode. It's a little bit of a longer one because there's so many details that my guest shares on how you can become a better leader. And so let's dive in. So just to give you a little bit of background on my guest today is Scott Miller. He's the Executive Vice President of Thought Leadership and the Chief Marketing Officer at FranklinCovey. He's the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of 2 different books. This one here, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, The 6 Critical Practices of Leading a Team. And then his other one is Management Mess to Leadership Success. So I've been reading his books just in preparation for this interview, and I've been taking copious notes because I've learned so much from him about how to be a better leader for my team. And so whether you're in corporate leading a team or whether you're an entrepreneur and you're leading a remote VA, there are so many nuances to how to appropriately and effectively lead someone. And one of the things Scott talks about in his books and on this interview, which is so true, is that most of us who find ourselves in a leadership position, we're never really trained on how to do it. All of a sudden you're leading a team, whether it's one person or whether it's 100 people, and you were never given the roadmap, the playbook for how to do it. And your role and the way that you show up and what you do every day needs to be dramatically different from when you're a solo producer to when you are leading a group of people. And so I wanted to have Scott on to share with us these 6 critical practices for leading a team. And I'm telling you, this one was dynamite. He's relatable. He kind of talks about some of his stories being in the trenches and how he even got passionate about this topic. But at the end of the day, if you take and implement what Scott teaches, I can tell you, you're going to be a better leader for your team. Your people are going to want to stay with you longer. Your business is going to grow and you're going to make your greater impact in the world, which is why I know you're here. So I can't wait to share this conversation with you, and let's go ahead and get right into it with Scott Miller. Scott, it is so good to have you on the Instant Impact Podcast. I'm excited about this topic of how we can be better leaders for our team. I think it's so needed today, and you are such an expert in this space. So I cannot wait for you to bless me and our listeners with your wealth of knowledge. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the platform. I'm not sure I'm an expert, but my mom hopefully thinks I am now.
That's half the battle, right?
That's half the battle, mom and dad. Yeah.
Well, part of why I like this topic is, and I think you talk about this in your books too, but so many of us, when maybe we leave corporate and become an entrepreneur, maybe we're still in corporate, but have been there for a while and risen the ranks. You talk about in your books the fact that you often find yourself in a leadership position without having any training, any sort of manual or handbook, and all of a sudden you're kind of thrown in the fire and you're like, crap, what's next, right? And so I love this conversation because I think the more we can empower our leaders to know how they can best lead their team, how they can best show up, it's going to have such a positive ripple effect. So I would love if you could share, just start by sharing, you talk in your book, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, about kind of your experience at age 27, transitioning into leadership and what that was like for you. So can you take us through a little bit of that backstory and kind of how that got you inspired to talk about this topic today?
Sure. It was horrible. I'm not sure it's very inspiring. I mean, I think like you said, Elyse, most people move into leadership, whether it's in a Fortune 5,000 company or it's their own, skunk work side hustle, or they're an entrepreneur with 1 or 2 or 3 people on their team. Most of us tend to move into a leadership role a bit accidentally, right? I like to say few of us are actually led into leadership. I think we're lured into leadership because typically we'll promote the most efficient dental hygienist, right? Or the most creative digital designer, or the top producing salesperson, or we were great at something and now we've promoted ourselves into leadership. When rarely, Elyse, are the competencies that make the most efficient hygienist or the most creative digital designer or the best salesperson the same competencies that make them a great leader. In fact, they're the opposite, right? Think about a salesperson. A great salesperson has a lot of confidence in themselves, right? They have a big ego. They like to compete, not just with themselves, but with their colleagues. They like to win. And those are the opposite skills of what it takes to be a great sales leader. So I think too often people are lured into leadership. And I think also leadership is tougher than the industry says it is. Even FranklinCovey sometimes, I think, wraps it up a bit nice. Not everybody should be a leader. I don't agree with that. I think that there are some people who should not, in fact, lead people. And that's okay. There's no shame to that, right? Not everybody should be an anesthesiologist. Not everybody should host a podcast. You should certainly host one, but I mean, I'm not sure I should be hosting a podcast, right? I talk really fast and I'm kind of anxious. You get the point. So I think people have to really self-select into leadership of people because it's tough. It requires, difficult conversations and moving outside your comfort zone and confronting reality with people who might have been your peer or your friend or your spouse, right? Who work with you or for you. So it's complicated. But there are 6 practices that FranklinCovey believes if you can master. Are there more than 6? Of course, there's probably 60, right? But who wants to read a book with 60 practices? Our research showed that there were 6, that if you could get your hands around these, you can exponentially improve your leadership skills. In fact, Elyse, this is the final point. The statistics show, reported by Harvard Business Review, the average age that a person is promoted into their first leadership position is age 30. But the fact is, it's not until they're 42 when they receive their first leadership training. So people are kind of, over 12 years wreaking havoc, right? Doing damage, not because they're sociopaths, they're well-intended. They're just like me thinking, well, my job is now to turn everybody else into my clone. My job is to make, Scott little mini-me's. Of course, that's not right. Your job as a leader is to get work done with and through other people. It's a fundamental mindset shift that I did not even realize when I became a leader. I thought leaders were supposed to be charismatic and hard charging and get it done their way. It's not true.
Wow. Gosh, it's so true. And, as you talk, I just think about, I think a lot of us were raised with leaders working maybe in our first job, our second job with leaders who maybe they're in that 12 years where they didn't get that training. And so we see that and we think, okay, I'm supposed to mimic that and emulate that when I become a leader. So it's kind of this like self-perpetuating cycle. So let's get into these 6 practices because I think these are so good. And I've been reading your book and I've been taking notes. So kind of walk us through because I've picked up so much that I'm going to use with leading my own team. And I want everyone listening to be able to apply these principles as well.
Great. So the first practice is develop a leader's mindset. For those of you who are followers or fans of the FranklinCovey company, I bet many of your listeners have read our co-founder's book. Dr. Stephen R. Covey wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Can you believe that book is in its 30th year and has sold 50 million copies? And Dr. Covey popularized this idea of a paradigm shift, right? He didn't invent it, but he popularized it. A paradigm, of course, is your belief system, your mindset, kind of the metaphorical glasses through which you see the world. And none of us see the world completely accurate, right? We all have these sort of jaded lenses. And so the first practice is develop a leader's mindset. And I mentioned this earlier, no longer is the mindset that I get work done by myself, I save the day, that I'm the smartest person in the room. No, in fact, your job is to get work done with and through other people. And that is the first practice, is you have to have a mindset shift. And Elyse, all of us are deeply enculturated since birth to have entrenched mindsets taught to us by our parents, by our ministers, by our junior high school principals, by our aunties. I mean, I'm 51, Elyse. I was raised in Central Florida in an upper middle class family. And I was raised to believe, to perhaps some people's horror, that doctors, police officers, and Catholic priests always were right and always told the truth. It was my paradigm. And by the way, in the 70s, that wasn't an outrageous thought. Elyse, are doctors always right?
No.
Do police officers always tell the truth?
No.
Are Catholic priests always right? And do they always tell the truth?
Nope.
No, and I'm a member of that faith, a member in good standing, and I've had an amazing faith journey, and I'm very proud to say that. But can you imagine if I had been a 7-year-old boy taught to believe and that a pedophile had brought me back? I mean, it could have destroyed my life.
Yeah.
And I mean that to be a little bit heavy, but I want every leader listening today to challenge your own paradigms, because you have paradigms around your role, your business, your legacy, how hard it was to build this practice, the people who work for you, their talents. Are they lazy? Are they smart? And as a leader, as an entrepreneurial leader, I'd ask you to challenge your paradigms. Make a list of everybody working for you. What's your belief system about them? And can they behave their way out of it? Because these paradigms are subconscious, and they're deeply entrenched in us. And I think if you're going to grow your business and you're going to be a better leader, you have to realize that you have a paradigm about your team, your industry, your competition, your business, your growth plan, your business model. It's likely not accurate. It's probably ambitious. It may not be complete. And it means that you challenge it and decide which of my entrenched paradigms are accurate and which are inaccurate, especially about those you work with and those who work for you.
Mm. Well, and one of the things that comes up for me while you talk about that is something I learned when I first got into leadership, which is that people in general will live into the vision that you have for them and the way
That's
that
right.
you see them. And so
Yeah.
I think it's such an important conversation because our paradigms, it's like we don't even stop to question them. We just assume them to be
Right.
true.
Right.
And I want to share just a couple of these questions that you recommend that leaders ask, because I think they're so powerful. And obviously people need to read the book to get like all the great information, but you talk about as a leader, you need to be asking yourself, what kind of leader does your team right now? And what do you need to either learn or unlearn to become the leader they need? So I think just thinking about like some tactics for how we can start to shift our paradigms and can start to
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
differently
Yeah.
about this. And those questions are so good.
Can I share
So
one more insight?
please. Yeah.
Whenever I'm keynoting on the book, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. And by the way, as experts in the industry, right, we're very clear on the difference between management and leadership and management. I think by and large, most managers need to be better leaders, and
Mm.
some leaders can be better managers. But when I'm out speaking to audiences, I'll talk all the time about how when I was promoted as a salesperson to be a sales leader, I wish someone would have sat me down and said, Scott, here's 9 things you do really well as a salesperson. Tomorrow, you have to stop doing 5 of these because these are
Mm.
not skills of a sales leader. And here's 8 more things that are new that you currently do not know how to do that you'll need to learn, not overnight, but probably in the coming days and weeks and months. And no one really taught me that the skills that got me here aren't going to be the skills that take me there. I know it's a cliche, but it's so true. So I would ask your listeners and your viewers to say, those of you who are formal leaders of people, what are the skills that got you to where you are, and assess which ones may be working against you now that you're a leader of people. The first critical practice for leading a team is to develop a leader's mindset. That might be different than a contributor's, than to a founder's, than to an entrepreneur's mindset. Not all entrepreneurs make great leaders of people. They're different skills.
Truth, my friend. All right, this is so good. So that's the. If you're not watching the video, we're doing like a little fist bump. Hallelujah! All right,
Hands in the
so,
air.
hands in the air. All right, so talk to us about the second. What's the second
Right.
practice?
So the second one is hold regular one-on-ones. And I love this practice. And although it is meant to be a new meeting on your schedule, no one needs a new meeting. This is a different kind of meeting, holding regular one-on-ones. It requires a new mindset, a new paradigm shift. This is not your meeting as a leader. This is your team members' meeting, the person who reports to you. They set the meeting. They call the meeting. They create the agenda for the meeting. They lead the meeting. This is a 30-minute meeting, very short, perhaps once a week, or maybe once every 2 weeks. Don't overcommit. But this is a chance for them to do 90% or 80% of the talking. And as a leader, for you to pull out and dust off your listening skills, which are probably pretty poor, because as a leader, you've been trained like me to communicate, clarify, reinforce the message, your mission, your vision, your values. You have to listen empathically, move off your timeline, move off your agenda, move off your own frame of mind, and talk 20% of the time. This is a chance for you to understand what's going on in their world. How are they enjoying their job? What are their passions? What are their fears? Have they moved that proverbial button on LinkedIn to the right that says open to opportunities? It's not a good
Mm.
thing. People don't quit their jobs. They quit their leader and they quit their culture. And Elyse, this idea that leaders create engagement is not true. We hear it a lot in the OD world. Leaders do not create engagement. Leaders create the conditions for others to choose their own level of engagement, high or low. So in this meeting, you might ask your person when it's your turn to talk, what's it like working here at the company? What's it like working for me as a leader? In fact, for that matter, I'd encourage your listeners to go back and ask your spouse or partner, what's it like to be married to me? Ask your kids,
Wow.
what's it like to have me as your father? Go ask your father-in-law, what's it like to have me being married to your daughter or to your husband? These are insightful questions. And when I'm out speaking, Elyse, I love to ask this question. I'm going to pose it to you. Why do you think the person 3 cubicles down from you is eating popcorn for lunch on Thursday? Any idea?
No idea. I wouldn't even know how to answer that.
I get lots of answers. Here the question is, why is the person 3 cubicles down from you eating popcorn for lunch on Thursday? I get all kinds of responses. Well, he loves popcorn, or it's popcorn Thursday, or they sit next to the break room. None of those are true. The reason the guy or gal is eating popcorn for lunch on Thursday is because payday is Friday. And they just put the last $3 to their name in their gas tank to get to work.
Wow.
And if that surprises any of your listeners, they are disconnected with the way 90% of your employees and the world lives.
Wow. Yeah.
And at midnight, when their paycheck hits direct deposit, they're going to the grocery store and buying milk and Cheerios because it's been a lean 24 hours for their kids. I mean, also to be a bit heavy. Everybody's got something going on. Everybody's got a teenage son who's vaping. Everyone's got a mother-in-law moving into dementia. Everybody's got a bill they can't pay. People bring that to the office, and you kind of want them to. You don't want people leaving their personal problems at homes anymore. That's an 80s paradigm. The paradigm is you want people to bring their whole person, their whole self, including their stress, because people don't quit bosses who love them. People don't quit bosses who care about them and understand that they're going through stress, because the more as a leader you can understand what people are going through, the more you can listen. I didn't say solve all their problems, but people don't go across the street for a free soda machine or 1% more commission or $1 more an hour when they're comfortable talking to their leader about what's going on in their life. And this happens in your one-on-one meeting. It takes a paradigm shift to realize this idea of leaving your personal problems at the door is not happening anymore, right? We want a whole person at work. I don't want you bringing all your problems to work all day long. I mean, obviously use some EQ, right, as leaders and as people. But during this one-on-one meeting, it's a chance for people to better get connected to their leader and for their leader to get better connected to their team.
Oh my gosh. You just, it just started me thinking differently about the people I work with and what's going on in their life. And I like to think of myself as someone who knows my team well and asks questions, but I'm realizing as you talk, like there's way deeper relationships I could be building. And I think when you bring up a good point of if someone's going through something like that, like living paycheck to paycheck, which statistically most Americans are, and struggling with that, it seems like if I'm hearing you right, it's not necessarily that we have to help them fix it, but it's that we have to make them feel like make them feel heard and help them know that we care. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. I mean, how many people have a bill they can't pay? How many people, are late on their rent or their kids' tuition and they're going out into the hall to have a private conversation? This is life, right? I think leaders, entrepreneurial leaders included, need to lessen the space between you and your team. That's an 80s paradigm. It's a 90s paradigm. It's a 70s paradigm, right? Where the boss was untouchable, where the boss was the smartest person in the room. One of my favorite books, and I know our time is tight today, is a book by Liz Wiseman. She's a very, very seasoned leader from Oracle. She wrote a book called Multipliers. Every one of your leaders and listeners should buy this book. Liz's premise is that our job is not to be the genius in the room, rather to be the genius maker of others in the room. I think especially with entrepreneurial leaders, where this was your business, this is your baby, you mortgaged your home, your financial future, right? You got your whole life invested in this. So your job is to be the smartest, the hardest working, the most well-read. And some of that may be true as the owner and founder, but no one wants to work for the smartest person in the room. And I think there's some heavy insight in the next couple of sentences. If some of your listeners are like me, and I'll bet they are, when the buck stops with you and you're the leader, we sometimes have to be the smartest person in the room. The problem with that is you then unintentionally hire people who you think are not smarter than you. You hire people who are not as competent as you are. You hire people whose skills you eclipse. And what happens is no one can ever be smart. No one can succeed because by your own strategy, you're so intimidated. You're so threatened by other people. Instead of doing that, recognize as an entrepreneurial leader, as a leader of people, your job is to hire the most talented payroll specialist, the most talented UX designer, the most talented salesperson. You want them to eclipse your skills. That's the kind of person. You have to check your own ego. And I think as people who have founded businesses, it's tough not to be the expert in everything. No, your job is to recruit and retain the smartest possible people and let them shine. Your job is to clear the red tape, cut through all of the bureaucracy, and let them eclipse you. Let them bring great ideas to you. Doesn't mean that ultimately you're not responsible for the yes or the no, or the buck stops with you. But have the courage to go out and find people who are palpably smarter than you, and in meetings who eclipse you and say, you know what? This is great. I've surrounded myself with people who are the best social media designer, right? The top salesperson, and let them fly. It's easier said than done. Dr. Covey said common knowledge isn't always common practice.
Mm.
And to know, but not to do, is not to know. So I'd challenge your leaders to think about how vulnerable are you? How willing are you to hire people who are smarter and more talented than you? Step back and let them fly.
Yeah. So good.
This is gonna be a 2-hour podcast.
I know.
I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. It's worth it. It's worth it. I love this. I could talk to you about this all day. You've got so much wisdom to share. So, okay. So talk to us about number 3. What's the third practice?
Number 3 is set your team up for results. And this is really all about explaining the why behind the what, right? We know it's a cliche, the why behind the what, but as a leader, you have vastly more access to information than your team members, right? Who you're acquiring, who you're selling to, if you're moving campuses, a new product you're thinking about, an IPO, whatever it is, right? So you've got to be deliberate and appropriate about sharing the why behind the what, because no one knows what's in your mind. Because you've been thinking about it in the shower for 5 days does not mean that hopefully people have been in the shower with you, unless you're married to your co-partner, right? And then it's appropriate. But I think there's an important lesson to be learned here to providing appropriate context. Do your people understand why you're building this product or why they're working on this report? Take the time, slow down. Dr. Covey taught the difference between being efficient and being effective. He wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, not the book The 7 Habits of Highly Efficient People. This famous quote he said, with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. So if you want to set your team up for success, you got to slow down. You can tell I have a very efficient paradigm, right? List, I'm productive. On Saturdays, I'm at Home Depot at 5 a.m. I'm buying my marigolds. They're in the SUV by 5:30. They're planted by 5:45. The car's washed by 6. I'm ready for tennis by 7. That's great in my personal life. Having an efficient mindset has worked well for me. But with people, you can't be efficient. You have to be effective. It's fundamentally different. Close your laptop when they come in your office. Take off your glasses. Turn over your phone. Slow down. Take the time to explain the why behind the what. We also teach in this practice how to set great goals from X to Y by when. Very measurable goals with lead and lag measures. We teach delegating. Don't be the leader who delegates your entire job out to your team and they're wondering what the heck it is you're doing. And the opposite delegator is the person who is so fearful that they don't have time to train anybody, that nobody is capable or competent enough, so they hoard it all themselves. And the problem is they're doing that next week, next month, and next year, and they become a victim. They become a martyr, and they punish their people who have a life and who leave work at 5 p.m. because your paradigm is that nobody was incapable. I heard about a company a few days ago that on the wall in their office, it says, welcome, work hard, go home. And I love that because people need to have balanced lives as well. So on this practice, if you're going to set your team up for success, you have to spend time on the why behind the what and differentiate between having an effective and an efficient mindset.
Oh my gosh, so many good takeaways there. And the one other thing that I love that you said just about goal setting, because it makes it so simple, is from X to Y by when. Okay.
That's right. Every goal should be that way, right? Right. We're going to increase customer service from 86% to 92% by the end of our first quarter. And beyond that goal setting from X to Y by when, what are your lead measures and what are your lag measures, right? A lot of leaders are thinking that they're focused on last week's report. Well, that may be great if that's face-to-face meetings, that you know that every face-to-face meeting results in a 15% conversion rate or $4,000. But I think a lot of leaders confuse lead and lag measures, and we teach some of those principles in that practice.
One other thing you talk about in this section that I just want to spend a minute or two on, because I think it's so critical, is this concept of establishing a pre-forgiveness culture.
Oh,
And
yeah.
can you speak to that for a couple
I
minutes? Because
did.
I think this is
I
so good.
did.
Yeah.
This was not my idea. I added it into the book because when I joined the FranklinCovey company, I'd spent 4 years at the Disney company. I'm from Orlando, and that was great. They invited me to leave, which is a nice way of saying you can fill in the blanks.
I've been there too.
Yes, ma'am. And the FranklinCovey company picked me up, and my first leader was Chuck Farnsworth. I was a frontline salesperson in the education division, selling our leadership solutions to universities. And Chuck was a very unconventional leader. He came to the company as a superintendent of a school district, and he established this idea of a pre-forgiveness culture, which meant, welcome aboard. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes with clients. You're going to make mistakes with colleagues. You're going to say things you regret. You're going to do things that aren't always right. Our standard is high, but you are pre-forgiven. So recognize that you don't have to be perfect. You're going to have to owe someone an apology for something you said that was crass. You're going to have to take responsibility for your share of a problem. But because you are pre-forgiven coming in the door, I expect a higher level of standard. And I think it gives you, as a leader, this latitude where everyone's not so concerned about making a mistake, right? Or taking a risk, because responsible risks are what grow your business. And entrepreneurs, I'll speak to that group because I think this is your lifeblood. This is your baby. This is your future. This is your home equity loan, right? That you've taken out to build your business. And sometimes we're so concerned about not allowing people to take risks. Not reckless risks, right? Not irresponsible risks. But if you establish a pre-forgiveness culture, most people won't want to cash that in. And that's what happened with Chuck, is I didn't want to become less responsible. I instead became more responsible because I didn't want to have to come to him kind of hat in hand and say, you know what? I was a jerk in that last meeting. I really offended 5 people. Now, I was, and I did, and I had to apologize for it. But I knew that with Chuck, I was going to get a couple of more chances. And it lightened the air. He also allowed everybody to have, I think, a couple $100 latitude on fixing a customer service problem right there on the spot. It was a great level of empowerment. It was empowerment in action. It wasn't just, I'm going to empower my leaders. No, you are empowered to make a X $100 decision on the spot with a client, correct the invoice, forgive something, because I trust you to make the right decision for the client. That's how Zappos has grown to what it has, because that was their culture, was customer service officers making $10, $15, $20 an hour were empowered to make the right decision right there, and they built raving fans and made a lot of people a lot of money when Amazon bought them.
Yeah, I love that policy. I feel like I've heard of numerous incredible cultures doing that, like Zappos. I think Ritz-Carlton has something similar. So I think we can all be thinking about what would that number be for me that I could give my team, that threshold, because it is so empowering. Okay, so great. So tell us about number 4. What's the 4th practice?
Number 4 is about creating a culture of feedback. And this is so important, because I think the number 1 job as a leader after recruiting and retaining talent is making people aware of their blind spots. We all have them, right? I'm not as nice or as kind as I think I am. You're not as punctual or as collaborative as you think you are. You know, someone's breath isn't as good as they think it is. And I mean that to be kind of comical, but it's true. As a leader, your job is to show high courage, diplomatic styles, and how you approach people on their blind spots. You have to move outside your comfort zone. You have to be willing to confront and discuss the undiscussables. And if you don't have that talent or that desire, step down, because you do not deserve to be a leader of people. Your job is to help them understand what their blind spots are, what's holding them back, how to build their brand, and do it in a way that shows high courage, but also high consideration. Because a lot of us fall on one of 2 sides, at least, right? Like me, where I'm only scared of sharks, snakes, and alligators. I'm from Florida. People do not scare me. I am a very courageous person. I'll talk to you about your body odor. It's very common for me to sit you down and say, Elyse, can you come in my office? Hey, I have a high courage conversation to have with you. What is said in here stays in here. And I've noticed that there's an issue that I think you need to work on that's holding your brand back. My intent is to help you build an amazing career here, and maybe someday somewhere else if so you choose. But I'm noticing, like me, you might be breaking through your deodorant. It's hot in Atlanta in the summer times. We often sometimes build up a chemical reaction. I don't want you to be embarrassed at all. It happens to me, happens to everybody. You might want to be aware of some of that before you were ever encountered by somebody else, or someone else might notice it, embarrass you. I want to build the best you possible. Maybe just determine if you maybe have broken through your deodorant sometimes, maybe you want to switch it up. Now,
Wow.
I said that, in record speed. That's not right for every culture, for every gender, you get it. But I do think it's appropriate and incumbent on every leader to give feedback. Now, not everybody's natural at it. You should role play it. You should practice it. You should sit down with someone in confidence. Let them judge you on your body language, on the words you're using, where to sit in the room, how delicate to deliver it. Because some people can be like me, too courageous, Elyse, and you can actually damage someone's self-esteem. You can impact and eviscerate their self-confidence. You can take away someone's self-worth if not delivered properly. So you got to deliver it both courageously and diplomatically. Of course, the opposite is true, right? We know leaders that are so timid and so shy and so careful, they call someone in to give them feedback, and like, well, that went well. And the person leaves thinking, what were we talking about? And you think, you know what, that person will never be late to their work again, and that person heard something totally different. So you can't phone it in. You have to show the courage and not just the consideration as well. As a leader, you've got to give high courage feedback outside your comfort zone to your people. Inevitably, when I walk through an airport, Elyse, I've hired hundreds of people. I've had to terminate dozens of them. Inevitably, the people that I have terminated say the same thing to me. Scott, it's great to see you. Man, you were a jerk. You were a jerk, Scott. And you know what, Scott? You were the one person in my entire career who had the guts to tell me that I was doing this behavior that was tripping me up, and you were right, and I really worked on that. Thank you for that gift.
Wow.
The last thought of this is when people ask me, well, what's the best way to get people to receive feedback? Model it. As a leader, you have to model that you're open to feedback. So make it safe for others to tell you their truth. As a leader, you have to not just say, hey, so how was my presentation? And people are thinking, the first slide or the 600th slide? The first hour or the third hour? Because we were all texting on Candy Crush and wanted to shoot ourselves. Nope. What most people say is, oh gosh, boss, it was great. You're awesome. Do more of that, because we're scared because the boss hasn't made it safe for us to tell the truth. So as a leader, you have to be really clear in your intention and make it true that you want the feedback. Don't dispute it. Don't deny it. Don't deflect it. Take it in, decide which feedback to take, and then let it go. And you will establish a culture of both giving and taking feedback. The more you practice it, the more you operate on it, and the more you stumble. People say to me, Scott, you're great at this. Yeah, I came out of the womb giving high courage feedback. No, I screwed up the first 10, which is why I think it's so important to declare your intent. Elyse, I've called you in today to have a private conversation. My intent is to help you have a great career here at FranklinCovey. There is a particular habit that I'm seeing over and over again with you that I'm not sure you're aware of. So I actually want to talk to you about that and make sure that I'm seeing it accurately. And I'm a bit nervous to share this with you. I'm actually a bit nervous, and I might actually use the wrong word, so give me a do-over if I don't say it properly, because my intent is to help you. Elyse, I'm noticing in meetings that you often tend to hog the time and take too much time, and people are actually commenting about it, and I'm not sure you're aware of that. I'm sure your intent isn't to hog the time. Are you seeing this ever happen, and why do you think people are feeling that way? You get the point, right? Just declare your intent, be vulnerable, and you'll lessen the anxiety of most people in that conversation.
This one hit home hardest for me because I think it's the one that I struggle with the most out of all of these. And so I appreciate that role play, because I probably personally err more towards the timid side.
Yeah.
So just even hearing that, like how you script it out, I'm going to go back and replay that part, because I think just the way you tee it up, the way you phrase it, as I was sitting there feeling like, what would it feel like to receive that? I feel like you actually care. I feel like you really care about how I feel, what's going on in my career. And it didn't feel like you were trying to tear me down, which I think is always my fear when I go into a
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
like that. So that
yeah.
was super helpful, super, super helpful.
Well, thank you. Thank
Uh,
you. I probably didn't role play it very well. I would slow down, right?
yeah.
Watch your body language, move over to their side, declare your intent. My
Mhm.
intent is to help you.
Yeah.
I'm a little nervous. I might use the wrong words. Those are three great techniques that will lower the tension immediately in most, not all, but most scenarios.
Love it. All right, my friend, tell us about number 5. What's the 5th
Okay, very
practice?
quickly, lead through change. I'll be short on this.
Okay.
Change is an emotional process. And
Mm.
that's the big idea, is that we tend to love change when it's our idea. We tend to hate it when it's someone else's idea. So as a leader, you've been thinking about things for a long time, right? And you're kind of foisting them on your people. Recognize that change is an emotional process, and not everybody will come at it at the same level of speed that you wish they would. In the book, we share a fairly simple change model with 4 different phases of change. And I think for every leader, it's just to recognize that not everybody's going to assimilate to your idea or love it as much as you do. And it may take time for you to clarify it and to appreciate some space between when you say it and when they adopt it. Work
Mm.
with them. Have a courageous conversation. Recognize that they might be some fear, some uncertainty, and don't steamroll over it. It's a great chapter around how to be confident in your change, but meet people where they are. At some point, they got to jump on the train. But don't make sure, don't make the mistake that everybody is going to all of a sudden tomorrow be hunky-dory with this new collaboration you have with the competitor when they're fearful of how it affects their rice bowl or their paycheck, right? Take the time with people. Slow is fast, and fast is slow.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And especially for those of us listening who maybe are starting a new company or in the infancy stages of a new company, things are changing so fast all the time. It can
Yeah,
be different from one week to the next, one day to the next. And so I think just
yeah.
having an awareness that even though it makes sense to you, it may not make sense to all your team members yet is so critical. So that
Yeah,
one's awesome. Yeah.
I think the big idea there as leaders, I think we sometimes forget how many commutes into the office, how many dinners, how many weekends we've been thinking about our strategy, thinking about it, and then we announce it and we've thought about it for 100 hours.
Yeah.
And now someone's heard about it for 2 minutes, and we expect people to have the same level, the same pace of assimilation that we've had. No, they've had 2 minutes. You've had 2 months to think about this, right? Or you've had, the 10-minute shower to think about it, whatever it is. Slow down a bit and get people on the same level of understanding emotionally and intellectually as you are.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. All right. So let's get on to number 6. What's the 6th practice?
As this one is really all about your energy level, right? Managing
Mm.
your time and energy. There's a lot written about this. This is just about recognizing that burnout is real. Burnout is not something that some organizational development uh, PhD cooked up, right? This is real. And leaders need to recognize that people need to have lives. Your job is your career. Your job is not your life.
Mm.
And for leaders, this is especially challenging, especially entrepreneurs and company owners and founders, because in many ways, it might be the fact that your company is your life because there's so much at stake. But it doesn't mean it's everybody else's life. So you have to model what you want to see in your people. Maybe not through your calorie intake, or maybe not through your yoga sessions or your Fitbit, or maybe it is. You can't prescribe that people live their lives. But people need to know that it's safe to have a life. It's safe to leave at 5 o'clock. It's safe to come at 9 o'clock as long as the job is getting done, right? What culture have you established? If everybody is in the office when the boss leaves, you've created a culture of face time. If it is
Mm.
not safe to leave before you, people are in fear, and you have created that culture. As leaders, you have to have a multidimensional life. You have to be reading and exercising and eating well and taking vacations. Leaders, you need to go on vacation. If you can't afford it, go home, close the curtains, clip your bonsai tree. I don't care. People need to know that it's safe to take time off. Because if you don't let them take a vacation, then they'll take it from their next boss at their next company.
Mm.
And by the
Wow.
way, people need a break from the boss. People need a break from you. And when you go to Maui for 7 days, don't sit by the pool and think up 15 new projects and come back and dump them on the Monday morning. No, they've been working their butts off while you've been on vacation, right? Come back and send them on vacation. I've worked for a leader who went on vacation, and because he and his wife weren't talking during those 7 days, he thought up 15 ideas because he was convinced we were back at the office goofing off. No, damn it, I was busting my butt. And now when
No
you come
kidding.
back, I'm going to go on vacation. So you know what? When people go on vacation, encourage them. Ask them how it was. Tell them to post their selfies. Don't shame them. People need to have balance in their life. And as a leader, you must model it first.
Wow. Which is probably the hardest for so many people. I know for me, for many years it
Sure.
was. And
Hard for me.
but it makes such a big difference. And even when
Yeah.
I exited a company that a number of us at my new company were part of, and when we started this new company, we were like, what are the things that are really important to us? And what are the things that we want to instill in terms of values for ourselves, for our team members? And it was unequivocally like family time first, personal time first. And I can just feel the difference in the energy with our team,
Yeah.
with my
Yeah.
team members who I lead now. And it's so different when you feel like you can show up as a whole person rather than someone burnt out and depleted. And I think Eastern cultures get this a lot better than Western culture. So I love that you're talking about this, and I love that you're bringing this up
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
think it's so critical for longevity, for enjoyment of life as well. So
I'm
I
sure your
love that this is
listeners
going.
are thinking that's easy to say, but I need to make payroll next week, right? So I need everyone working their hardest. I get it. It's a tenuous balance, right?
Yeah.
And as a leader, sit down and talk about it. Say,
Mm.
guys, I struggle with this, right? I struggle with life balance, and I'll bet you do too. And I want to create a culture where you feel free to come, work hard, and go home. We need the most out of you. So would everybody just bring your highest level of engagement, your highest level of EQ? If you ever feel like I'm shaming you, talk to me about it. I'm scared. I'm working hard. I know you're probably scared too. I think more vulnerable you can be. People want to work for a real leader. Let me share one final thought. I know we're into our 4th hour of this podcast, and I'm sorry.
Every
But
hour has been amazing. It's been so worth it. I love it.
this is, I think, an important point as well. Send-offs are more about those who stay than those who leave. When someone comes to you and says, hey, Scott, I'm sorry to tell you, I've decided to take a job at, XYZ company. Most entrepreneurs, most founders, most leaders take it very personally. They're very offended. How dare you do this to me? How dare you go to our competition? Oh, that's where you were the last 3 weeks during the staff meeting. You were interviewing. Do not shame anyone when they leave. Do not shame anyone. Summon the courage to say, I'm sad. I'm so sad, but I'm so happy for you. If that's the right decision, then I'm okay with it. And I wish you great luck over there. Call me anytime. Learn as much as you can. Absorb it all, because I want you back here in 3 years, bringing all that knowledge back here. And in the meantime, would you refer in all your high trustworthy, high competent friends? We'd love to have them. Because send-offs are more about everybody who's staying, because they're watching how you're treating the person who is leaving. Because if you shame that person and you walk that person to the door and you make them a pariah, then you have just created that culture where everybody else knows it's going to happen the same to them. Be very thoughtful on how you treat people as they exit.
Oh my gosh. This is incredible. Thank you just so much. And everything that you share, I think I love how you summed it up at the end. So much of this boils down to just being a real person, being vulnerable, being
Yeah,
authentic with our team. And
yeah.
there's nothing else that I think creates trust at that level. So this has been such a learning experience for
Thank you.
me. And I'm so grateful just for all the wisdom that you shared. Scott, tell us about where can we connect with
Yeah,
you? Where can we get your
sure,
books?
sure.
Because I know people are going to want to connect with you further from this.
By the way, all of this I learned the hard way through making major mistakes.
Yeah.
I learned this in my 50s, not in my 20s, 30s, or 40s.
Yeah.
So I mentioned I co-wrote this book, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. You can buy it anywhere, 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. The book that I wrote that preceded that is called Management Mess to Leadership Success. It's also a great book. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere. My wife says it's kind of hard not to find me these days. So Google Scott Miller at FranklinCovey. I'd love to have you follow me on LinkedIn. And Elyse, I'm grateful for the platform today.
Yes. Thank you so much, Scott. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
My delight.